Welcome to the podcast for Boomer Women, where we are embracing the journey. I'm your host, Agnes Knowles. My guest today embodies embracing the journey. Jannette is both a role model and a guiding light for who she calls maturepreneurs, but I'd expand that out to womanpreneurs generally. She is funny, irreverent, a wee bit pushy. As she says, my sister by another mister. Jannette can spout some very impressive statistics, and in the same breath, she'll use them to convince you need to go for that dream. There are so many reasons for you to embrace this time of life. Don't let it just happen to you, and don't let everyone keep shooting on you. As always, I ask my guests what we haven't talked about. Today, Jannette gives us an answer I didn't expect, but is so basic and valuable to creating your own next chapter. Listen now. You've heard some of the words for entrepreneur: solopreneur, mompreneur, expatpreneur. How about maturepreneur? And apparently that preneur gets followed by hashtag not done by a long shot, exclamation mark. In the profile I received for today's guest, it says, the face of business is changing dramatically. It's becoming a lot more wrinkled. Sort of pulling all mine out right at the moment. Jannette explores how the largest surge of entrepreneurs to enter the marketplace at any time in history will impact the economy, our thinking, and global trends. Maturepreneurs are those who are 55 plus and who are hashtag not done by a long shot. Now, that profile also discusses ageism, and that's definitely one of my soapboxes, so stay tuned in for that. Let's get started. Jannette Anderson, welcome to the podcast for Boomer Women, where we are embracing the journey.
Awesome. I am so happy to be here because you and I are kindred spirits on a kindred journey, so I love it.
Yeah, this is great. I was really excited when I saw your profile come into my inbox. That's great. Now, you share statistics like 19.4% of women business owners are baby boomers, 88.3% are over 44, and many of them are 55 plus. That probably answers my first question, why you are so passionate about maturepreneurs.
Well, kind of. I'm actually passionate about, well, first of all, most coaches, consultants, and, problem solvers tend to gravitate towards who they are or who they were when they had the problem. So usually 3 or 4 years back. So if you're a coach trying to define who your target market is, look at you when you decided to become a coach. Where were you at? That's probably your target market. But the reason that I became fascinated with maturepreneurs is because I was the subject of ageism on a business cruise called Marketers Cruise in 2020. I had been helping women entrepreneurs for about 10, 12 years, predominantly because I think women shift the conversation around anything, but especially around business. We do it differently, which then impacts and ripples out in society. We tend to be more collaborative, co-creative, and that then shifts how the world goes. And that's why there's been such an upsurge of women's shows and women's programs and calls to women to really step into our power and make a difference and be the difference that only we can be. But I was on this cruise and I was at a networking event on the cruise, starts at 11 o'clock at night. And a gentleman in a small group asked me, what do you do? And I was mid-sentence answering him, and he turned and started talking to someone else. And I thought, oh, what a dick. So I politely excused myself because I'm Canadian and went on to the next group. And then lo and behold, the same thing happened again. So Agnes, of course, then I, as a woman, I go, well, it must be me. So am I like not showing up? Am I not being, visible? No, I have blue hair, big glasses. I'm a big, energetic woman. I'm pretty visible. And so, nope, that wasn't it. Okay, then what was it? And I started to just get curious and observe. What I noticed was everybody who was older was pretty much ignored. And especially there was at that time about 6 of us that were women who were over 60 and were not only ignored, but actually a couple of them were like literally invisible, not seen at a dinner table. And so I was fascinated and frankly pissed off by that, and decided that that needed to stop. So I started to really shift my attention to what's going on in the world around older people, working, entrepreneurship, etc. And there's some fascinating trends and global epidemics that are impacting what I call this perfect storm of opportunity. So that's how I got interested in becoming a maturepreneur.
Okay, and you may just have segued perfectly. I do want to come back to ageism because I get on my
Yeah.
soapbox. I'm sorry. Um, but you said, or I said in the intro, but it came from your profile, that the surge of entrepreneurs will affect the economy, our thinking, and global trends. Now, is that entrepreneurs in general or maturepreneurs specifically?
Well, both. Entrepreneurship is one of the biggest economic boosters in the world. More people are employed in small business than in large businesses. Most people think that large business runs the world, but really economically, small business does. What's interesting right now is the largest cohort of new entrepreneurs to come into surge into the business marketplace in history is happening right now because of the boomer market, boomers and Gen Xers who are not done and who want to continue to contribute, but also have to earn, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's the largest cohort, and we're talking millions and millions and millions, and yet this market is being overlooked. No one's targeting us. No one's, marketing to us. At the same time, it's also the market that has the most wealth in the hands of one group ever in history. Currently, 79.5% of the world's wealth resides in the hands of boomers. Almost 80% of the total wealth of the world is in the hands of a small subsection, a large subsection of the population. Now, it's transferring to Gen Xers and millennials, but you wouldn't know that to look at, say, the marketing on TV, because when you look at marketing targeted us, it's for stair lifts and walk-in tubs and Depends and Viagra and stuff like that, right? Stuff that kind of caters to what I call the decline and decrepitude market. But it's, and many of us need lots of that stuff. It's helpful, but there's so much more that they could be tapping into to capture that 80% of the wealth, like our desire to travel, our desire to create businesses, our desires to contribute and give back, and so forth. And people are not, they just assume, we're older, therefore we've retired and we're out of the equation. Nothing could be further from the truth.
So, does it stand to reason then that our demographic, we boomers, whatever that age group is, or 55 plus, when we are creating our businesses, we may as well target our own demographic? Because I'm not going to criticize you for your age or your blue hair or your big glasses. I'm going to say, as we just proved in the 3 minutes we chatted before I clicked record, is, there's all sorts of things that we can talk about that we're similar about. So does that make sense that when we are creating our own businesses, that probably looking to our own demographic is a good idea?
Yes and no. Yes, because of course it's a big untapped demographic, and if something that we have that can serve them, then absolutely. So, for example, I have been helping entrepreneurs to grow their business for the better part of 40 years, and now I'm specifically targeting this market because it speaks to me and I speak to it. But I still help people who are 30 and 40 and so forth in terms of my client base. But it depends on what is the product or service that they want to bring to market. I think a lot of us are going to default to supporting one another because it's a wide open market. And like I said earlier, we tend to know and therefore speak to and understand and gravitate towards wanting to support people who are kind of like us in some way. But that doesn't mean there's not lots of opportunities that exist. Like I'll give you a quick story. There's a lady named Marjorie Zingle here in Calgary, Alberta, who started a data center. She didn't have any tech background at all, but she had an opportunity to buy kind of a rundown tech center and her data center, bought it at 69, has been growing it for 20 years, just took on 20,000 additional square feet to expand it, and is starting her second technology business at 89. She is less and less the exception and more the rule. So people who are doing things that either are their interest or they see a good opportunity or, just maybe fall into it. But what I really am encouraging is that people decide, what do I want this next chapter to be about for me? How do I envision my life? Who do I want to be in the world? And based on that, and or, what do I want my legacy to be, or what do I want to affect here? And then based on that, design your life around that. And it might be creating a nonprofit. It could be creating a social enterprise. It could be a business. It could be a side hustle or a gig work. It could be going back to work. But I got to tell you, that's a tough row. It is. Systemic ageism makes it next to impossible for people to get jobs at the level that they may want to and deserve to get. I don't mean to, rain on your parade if you're trying to get a job, but I just know so many people who've been trying for a year, 2 years, 3 years to get employment. So that's why I'm really advocating that people take a look at entrepreneurship and defining your own future that way.
Well, and I will say too that, when I interview other women our age who have businesses and they're promoting them and things like that, is I hear that story a lot of, especially with COVID in 2020, they were eased out or thrown out or whatever of their job and sort of said, like, at my age, I'm probably never going to get hired. So that's when they decided to pursue whatever that passion was for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's other reasons why people don't get hired, but and certainly you would never be told it was ageism because that's illegal. But I've got a friend here, highly competent woman, has sent out over 400 resumes, gone on 39 job interviews in the last 20 months. And so obviously if she's coming in for the shortlisted interviews, her skills are a match. And she interviews well. She's not, there's no reason why she wouldn't get the job, other than they find out how old she is and say no and go with someone younger. So, and a lot of that is really just misconceptions. Things like, oh, well, you won't be with me long. I can pretty much guarantee that boomer will be with you longer than any millennial you hire. Because you're going to have 2 or 3 millennials in that position in the time that one boomer will be with you. Because they tend to work for 2 to 2.5 years and then move on statistically. And it's super expensive to find, hire, train, and ramp up and then do it all over again, people. So if you're someone in corporate or in a workplace, hire older people. They will stay with you longer. They are more loyal. They work harder. They're more productive. And they bring a different kind of innovation to the table that's really good to mix. And emotional intelligence. They make morale better in your workplace. So if you're anybody in a workplace, listen to this, hire older people.
Okay. Now, I composed my next question, and you may have just answered it, but I'm going to read it anyways because I was digging around your website. And so what I'm saying is, even I don't usually have wine this early in the day, but I understand that if I buy you a glass of wine, you'll explain why supporting me or us in turning our dreams into a kick-ass reality inspires the hell out of you. What am I buying you, first of all, and then tell us why it inspires you.
Well, when we get together, we'll decide then. But I do love a glass of wine, red or white. I'm not picky. Well, that's not true. I don't like rosé. Anyway, it's kind of like me in life. Don't be a crossover or a truck, or a crossover. Be a truck or a car, or an SUV or a car. Don't be red or white. Don't be pink. It's just like, pick a lane. Anyways, okay, my weirdness aside, I have been, I'm going to go back and tell you a quick little story about why I became entrepreneurial in the first place. And that probably will explain it better than anything else. But basically, when I was very young, I grew up very poor, in a lot of chaos, a lot of violence, a lot of drama and trauma. My mom was married 5 times. We moved 27 times in the first 29 years of my life. Lots of, violence with the various husbands and so forth. And so I kind of grew up very self-sufficient, and I loved books. They were my refuge. So I wanted the book Heidi when I was 6, and I begged my mom to buy it for me. Please, please, please. How about now? Can we get it now? How about now? Can we get it now? Hey, mom, can we? How about this week? Can we get it? Finally, one day she turned around, Agnes, and she said, "No, we can't afford it." And I was so shocked, not by what she said, because I heard that a lot, but by the look on her face. It was a look of sadness and anger and frustration and pain and hopelessness. And even though I was only 6, I remember, and I don't remember much of my childhood at all, but I remember that moment, and I remember deciding I never wanted to see that look on another person's face again. Not hers, not mine, not anyone's. And so I wanted to make sure that people had options, had a solution, had a way to not have to say that. And so, when we're kids, we don't overcomplicate things. So it's like problem, no money, solution, get money. So I decided I was going to have a business. So one day when mom was at work, I'm sure someone was supposed to be watching me, but I don't know who it was. I had seen someone have a garage sale. So I hauled everything out of our house and I priced it and I sold it. And I had a very successful day. Super excited. Mom came home, ran up to her. "Look, Mom, $13.64. Can we go get the book now?" Right? Problem, solution. That's not how she saw it, Agnes. She was very, very upset that I had sold her knickknacks and her household items and her brand new pink wool dress. And in fact, she was not happy at all. So I got spanked. She took my money. I had to go buy back everything I could. And the kids wouldn't sell me back my toys. So I lost most of my toys. So many people would say not a very good or successful first venture. But I learned 2 very important lessons. The first is, don't go into business with family. I'm kidding, but not really. And the second is that we can manifest our dreams. We can solve problems. We can create the solutions that we want when we take our destiny into our own hands through business, through being entrepreneurs, through really just getting in the driver's seat of our life. And ever since then, that has been a passion for me, is to solve problems practically. And, like I said, I grew up poor. So my next business was a lemonade franchise. I couldn't get up all the.
Franchise.
Yeah, I had a stand and then I saw 3 other corners that I couldn't fill. Do you remember those old TV trays with the 4 TV trays in them?
Yep.
So I went and got the other 3 trays, roped in 3 friends, got mom to make me 3 more jugs of lemonade, I made the signs, put them on the other corners, and we split the money 50-50. So it was really my first franchise. And then my very first business with an employee was, I was 11, he was 9. I had a daycare for the entire summer in our housing tenement, and I fed those poor kids peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day for about 45 days. Anyways, I think mom made me give them bologna one day. So just looping back, because I know there might be people who are concerned, I did eventually get the book Heidi, and it remains my favorite book to this day. But I really believe that entrepreneurialism is why I've been so passionate about supporting people, is a way to not only solve problems and create the life that we want, but it's also a way to express and live into our purpose. And that's what I think is really important for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm going to ask this next question on behalf of a listener who is wondering, should I, shouldn't I? Now, I have my own answers because I kind of am a maturepreneur.
Yeah.
Why is this group growing so fast? I want your answer.
Necessity and desire. So necessity, what most people don't realize is that 65% of North Americans can't afford to retire. That means they have to create income in order to be okay. And so they're somewhere between food and housing insecurity to just not having the life that they wish they had and having to downsize and so forth, but they have to create income. And you can't survive, at least in Canada for sure, and I'm pretty sure in the US as well, you can't survive on a government pension. In Canada, if you just have government pension, you're well below the poverty level. And so it's really important for us to have a way to make money. Like we said earlier, good luck getting a job. So pretty much the only option is entrepreneurship, or creating a side hustle or something to that extent. I consider all of that, being in a consultant, gig economy, all of that entrepreneurship, but some people distinguish it So that's the necessity part. The desire part is, even of the 35% who can afford to retire, many of them are choosing not to. I think a fairly large percentage, but it's hard to get stats on that, that are choosing to continue contributing, stay vital, healthy, happy. If you don't have purpose and meaning in your life, well, if you have purpose and meaning in your life, you live 8 years longer, and those are healthy, happy, productive years. If you are lonely, because there's a loneliness epidemic in the world, and isolated and don't have purpose, you will live 7 years less. The World Health Organization says it's the equivalent, loneliness is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of its impact on our health and well-being. So by necessity for money and connection and community, we are seeking out different ways to be in our older age. And by desire, we just aren't done. We're like Marjorie or other people who have lots to contribute still. And so we want to figure out a way to do that in some way with, be it nonprofit or whatever it might be. There's lots of vehicles, even if it's volunteering. There's lots of ways to still have impact and stay engaged in life. The thing is, this whole notion of retirement was actually created by Otto von Bismarck back in the Industrial Revolution in order to get rid of older workers. Okay, it still is used to get rid of older workers because we're more expensive, but it's an outdated notion. It's like so 1940s. And people now are living 10, 20, 30, 40 years past quote unquote retirement. We don't want to, very few people want to sit around and knit and golf or just knit and golf for 40 years or 30 years, right? So we need to stay engaged and active. So that's from our side. From the world's side, oh my God, we cannot afford to lose this wisdom workforce. We can't afford to lose the expertise, the value, the perspective, the kind of innovation that we bring. So, and practically speaking, there will be more work for older people soon because we have an employee shortage. This is a long answer to your question, but hopefully it answers it. It used to be 200 people came into the workforce for every 100 that left about 25 years ago. Now, 80 people are coming in for every 100 that are leaving. So we're going to have an employee shortage very soon. We already do, but it's going to get critical very soon. Companies will close, etc. Unless they tap into the millions, just under a billion, of people globally worldwide who are ready, able, and willing to work. If they do that, if they pull their head out of their butt and recognize there's a whole demographic available to them, then that would solve the employee crisis. But in the meantime, we need to start businesses. So that's why I think it's growing so much. That's why I think it's such a big trend right now. It's a number of factors. It's the combination of, biggest cohort of entrepreneurs, most money available, the loneliness epidemic and the poverty epidemic coming together in that perfect storm.
You just touched on so many important issues. I know if I look at just my government pensions, here in Victoria, I can't even afford an apartment, let alone feed myself. So very much so you need more money coming from somewhere.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
And as you say, I don't care what your hobby is, the thought of doing that for 20, 30, 40 years, unless you're going to learn a new language every year or something that really stimulates your brain. But then again, creating a business. I mean, I got 2 courses sitting over here on a box that I'm packing up house, and it's like they're the last things to go in because I want them to be the first things back out when so just that fact of keeping on learning anything. And it doesn't matter what you want to do or where your interest lies, you can find out about it now that we have, the internet, the interweb, or whatever people call it.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's the learning and growing and stretching ourselves and not getting, not dying within our comfort zone is what I would call it. But I think it's also even deeper than that. We need to matter. And one of the challenges for a lot of the older generation is they feel like they don't matter anymore. And that's so not true. But we have to get over that sense of dismissal and inherent internal ageism in ourselves to recognize that yes, we do matter, and yes, we can live into that when we choose to.
Yeah. And the other thing I hear people saying is, oh, like I'm going to move closer to the grandchildren. Well,
Mhm.
I live within a 15-minute drive of 5 grandchildren, and between their sports and school and extracurriculars
Mhm.
and their friends and this and that and the next thing, it's like I have to book ahead. And it's not because they don't want to see me. They all get really excited, but their lives are so busy that,
Yes.
yeah, you just can't change your life
Yeah.
for that reason.
Yes.
Probably. I mean, there's probably times when, yeah, you can, but
Yeah.
generally it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And they're busy, and generally centering our life around any person, whether it's a husband earlier, or our kids, or then our grandkids, we can often get lost in that equation, right? And so, what do I want? Who do I want to be in the world? What do I want my impact or legacy or contribution to be? Those are important questions, and it's one of the privileges and challenges of getting older is we have more latitude to be able to focus on that, because most of our life we've been driven by shoulds and have tos and so forth, and now there's less of that in some ways, or we care less about it. There's still a whole bunch of shoulds in terms of I gotta make money, I gotta, etc. But we don't deal with it in the same way. We don't let it. We don't. Approval is not as big an issue for most of us as it used to be.
Yeah. And I,
Thank
I
God.
will lend you a phrase that I use all the time, but this grandma's off her rocker.
Ah,
So it's
exactly.
like,
I
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really busy. And I mean, the other part of that is, I mean, you mentioned legacy earlier, is, you know, my kids, I'll say my girls, my son lives far away. I don't see him quite as much, but, my girls are really impressed with what I'm doing. My
Mhm.
grandchildren know that, like I can't just come at the drop of a hat because I have a life and I'm busy. So setting
Yeah.
that example of, being productive and doing all this sort of stuff, being busy, vital, funny, smart,
Mhm.
whatever, up into your 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever it is a
Mhm.
really good example to set for younger generations. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're in the process of redefining what aging means, because there's all these notions. So there's this great website called Yo Is This Ageist .com, I think. And it's just, we you can go and check various comments and phrases and things that we don't even think about. Things like, you look good for your age. Well, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does 60 look like? What does 40 look like? What does 20 like, and things like that. There are subtle and not so subtle ageist barriers and things that kind of diminish older people that we really need to overcome. I love Ashton Applewhite's work. She's got a book called This Chair Rocks, and she has oldschool.info or .org, I
Uh,
forget, where there's a ton of great resources on this whole thing of redefining aging, and part of that is inaction by virtue of how we live our lives, right? Like, do we choose to be polyhomorous, or do we choose to, split our time between a couple of places? What lifestyle do we want? What do we want to be, do, and have? And we I mean, we always do at every point in our life, but I think there's more of a sense of it when we're older, that we have a blank slate and we can write on that slate what we choose.
there you go. Mine's a really big slate. I got a lot of things to write.
Well, and you're taking up a new adventure soon too. What prompted that?
We'll get to that because that's going to be a whole nother part of our discussion.
Okay, all right. I don't
Let,
want to get too sure on you.
but let's stick with maturepreneurs for a moment. There was a comment in your profile that said there's challenges that they have. What do you see are the biggest challenges that maturepreneurs have?
Well, first and foremost, internalized ageism. I don't know if I can do this. I'm too old for this.
Mhm.
I can't keep up technologically, etc. All of those things, none of which is true, unless, of course, we believe it's true, and then it is. The fixed mindset versus growth mindset is a block and barrier for anyone in life, but certainly older. You need to learn new things. to be able to pivot and adapt to the new society. You do at any age right now, but you do older. And so developing a growth mindset is really critical. So that's kind of the internal work. And being willing to be brave and go outside of the notions of who and how we're supposed to be, right? Like we grew up in a generation very different than the women of today, right? And so we need to think differently about who we are and how what is appropriate for us, and do we believe those values or not. So a lot of that is also important, is to really take a look at, is this true for me, or is it just something that I have a belief that I've adopted and maintained because it was planted in me a long time ago, but really isn't my voice, really isn't mine. So internal work. Then the second thing is there are systemic challenges, like, for instance, good luck getting business insurance or a bank loan or venture capital interest if you're over 60 or even 55. They just, don't have those products because they don't think of us as a market, which is really stupid. Because it's, again, millions of people with billions of dollars, aka a really big market. And B, they think that, we won't live long enough to pay it back or whatever. Again, not true. We're likely to be around, more loyal, more productive, etc. Founders who are over 50 are statistically far more, like tech founders of tech companies, statistically far more, and I don't know the percentage, but it's like something like 68% more successful than the young tech bros in Silicon Valley that are launching companies, right? And yet VCs, venture capital investors, would invest in the young hoodie guy versus the older founder because they think that founder is not going to be, around long. Reality is the young millennial will be on to their next project in a few years, and this founder, the older founder, will be there for 20 years working on that business. So we need to update the expectations and beliefs in society. We need to change the language that we're dealing with, and part of that is really being aware of it and calling it. When people say things like, when someone says, "Hey, young lady," like, "Oh, dude, I'm 65. I earned every one of these wrinkles." That kind of thing. Whenever someone is dismissing or pandering or being condescending, calling it out. Because a lot of it is unconscious, right? They're not meaning to be mean, but they just have an old notion of what it means to deal with older people. So it's shifting a whole ism. So ageism, it's the same kind of work as shifting racism, sizeism, all of the isms. It's not easy. But also there are those practical systemic things like getting money and so forth that are a bit more of a challenge for older entrepreneurs than for younger ones.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting too, because I believe that there is this certain notion that we are incapable of learning what it takes to grow that big, as opposed to realizing that, hey, we've been growing and managing and taking on so many challenges in the last 40 years. You just look at even the computers and internet and stuff like that. It's crazy. Like, we are capable of all sorts of learning. It's
exactly. Well, and if you look at it, if you're older, you've probably reinvented yourself and gone through 10, 20 different roles in your life, versus someone younger who's maybe gone through 5 roles in their life, right? So we've got a lot more adaptability, typically have a lot more resilience, emotional intelligence, but also, people forget, we invented the internet. You're welcome. We invented AI. You're welcome. And we're sorry. So we need to recognize that, again, that notion that everybody who's older is not technologically savvy, that's a prejudice. It's not true. There are some people who struggle with it. I know young people who are not technologically savvy. I know young people who couldn't edit a video if their life depended on it. And my friend who's 76 loves doing video editing, and she's all over social media with her stuff. So,
we're verging on ageism all the way through here, which is fine. It's great. Now, one other thing I did want to touch on is you talk about what a woman should do to get results, but also who she needs to be.
Right.
Can you touch on that being part?
Well, and that's part of the thing that I was talking about in terms of defining that blank slate. Who do we choose to be? Um, is really a big question at any point, right? And I remember being a teenager and what am I going to do with my life and who am I going to be in the world and so forth. And then about middle age, we have that middle age crisis, which is, okay, who am I going to be in the world? And then when we get older, we have that same conversation. And I think being determined, being a rule breaker, being, someone who doesn't have to follow the status quo, choosing to be someone who is a contributor, really understanding our why we do what we do makes such a big difference, because then we know who do we want to be and how do we want to live into that. So, but my definition of our why is a bit different than a lot of people's, or purpose, if you want to call it that. A lot of people think it's what we do. I don't think that's it. I think our why is the intersection between what we're healing from our past and what we long for our future, for ourselves and others. And when we know what that is, it's like a thread that weaves through the tapestry of our lives. And when we know what that is, then we can align with that. We can make sure that we're dealing with people who align with that. So my why is that I want you to get that you matter and live like you do. And why is that my why? Because I always wanted to matter. I grew up not being first on the list, not even being on the list, actually. I just wanted to get on the damn list. And so that's something that for me in my life, I want to heal for me and for others, is that you matter, but also living like it. That's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship and making sure people live into their why practically, so that they're aligned with that way of being, and that comes first. And out of that comes the doing and the having and so forth. So when we know our why, we know we can differentiate ourselves in the market. Practically speaking, if you're a business person, we can make our strategic decisions. We can decide what kind of lifestyle we want. It underlies everything. And so I think it's important to know that. That's why I love being the why whisperer and helping people figure out their why, because it just makes it easier to kind of build everything else around. And that decision of who am I going to be is a moment by moment, day by day, and overarching decision. Right now, with everything that's going on in the world, how are we going to deal with it? Are we going to be angry and retaliatory? Are we going to buy into the us versus them stuff? Or are we going to be a fierce stand against bullying, but without being reactionary and creating more division? How are we going to be in response to what's going on? That's important, especially now, but always. So, yeah, it's important. And oftentimes it's really challenging to define those things ourselves, because it's right on the end of our nose. We can't see it. So we need support. We need a coach. We need someone, a therapist, a really good, objective, friend and so forth. But usually they can't help because they've got their own biases. To pull your hand back so that you can see, who am I? Who do I want to be? What's my why or my purpose? And what do I want to do about that? And how do I want to live into that? That's really good to get support for those questions.
Well, and I think doubly good insofar as by the time you're 55 or 60, you've just spent all of those years being what other people needed you to be, whether you were a daughter or a spouse or a mother or a teacher, an employee, like all those things. And then the kids go, you are finally able to say, you may still be a wife, but that relationship would change at that stage too, because he's no longer an active father. And so you can really start to plan for yourself, like where do I want to be in 1 year, 5 years, whatever, in terms of where and who. So so important.
It's a really important and wonderful time. People lament getting older. It's like, oh, girlfriend, it's awesome. You I don't know if I can say this on your podcast.
You can say it.
Okay. You give less shits about what other people think about you or about what you're supposed to do or be or how you're supposed to look. And that is so freeing and liberating. And thank God we finally get to it, because, a whole lifetime spent wrapped up in approval issues is such a waste of time and energy and so forth. And so, like you said, we stop being for other people. It doesn't mean you can't be loving. It doesn't mean you can't include other people in your life. Just because you put yourself first on the list doesn't turn you into a selfish human being. It just means you're now being as kind to you as you are to everyone else. And it's about time.
Yeah. There's so many things there. And I must admit, as I get older, is I will confront those people who are shoulding on me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why do you think I can't do this? Or why do you need me to be this person that I might have been 30 years ago? I am no longer that person. And
Mm-hmm.
if they can't come up with an answer, then it's just flip them off.
Yep,
The
yep,
four-finger
exactly,
salute.
exactly. And blessings on your journey. Piss off. I love you and release you and go away now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. There's no. At any given time, we need to be discerning about whose opinion we're letting matter more than our own. But especially now, that's the potential advantage of having wisdom, is that we have aligned our experience and our expertise and our heart and our knowing or our intuition, and that's what I define wisdom as. But just because we're old doesn't mean we're wise, and just because someone's young doesn't mean they're not wise, right? But hopefully at this stage we've got that alignment happening, so we do have some wisdom and perspective, and we don't fall into some of the many traps that we have most of our life.
When you said that, it just occurred to me that when we see a young person who has sort of an innate wisdom or carries themselves in that worldly way, we call
Mm-hmm.
them an old soul.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those people who are, by some definition, old, air quotes,
Yeah.
we don't give them the same credit
Yeah.
for
Well, and
wisdom.
I gotta say, not everybody who's old is wise.
No, no,
I met some really incredibly stupid, tuned out old people, right? But we at least have the option of having had a lot of experiences that might help carve a little more wisdom into our being.
yeah. I'm wondering too if those old people who are a little less wise, I'm choosing my words as I
Oh, what a
go.
kind way to say that.
But maybe they've been getting away with that shit for so long that it's just a habit. And once again, maybe that's not the real them. It's just
Mhm.
somebody they became in
Yeah.
response to stuff that was going on in their life for years and years and years.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. And they get to re-choose. They get to choose who they want to be.
yeah,
Like, just because you've been timid or quiet your whole life doesn't mean you can't choose to be courageous. You can.
yeah.
Just because you've been someone who follows the rules your whole life doesn't mean you can't choose to color outside the lines. Like, we get to choose. If we're on this side of the dirt, we have a choice.
I will tell you one very quick story. I spend a lot of time with my eldest grandson. When he was little, I had to get some work done on my computer, so I sat him down, and I didn't have a coloring book, so I downloaded some real simple pictures and gave him a bunch of pencils or whatever, and he was coloring. And he came to me later and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, Grandma." He said, "I colored outside the lines." And I
Mm.
looked at the picture and I went, "Oh, well, actually," I said, "what you did is you colored outside Grandma's lines. Let's look at this picture again." And I still had the pictures on my computer, so I just brought up the document and I said, like, where do you want your lines to be? And we redid it. So wherever he'd colored was inside his own lines. And I just thought,
Ah,
like, so color outside the lines. Like, whose
yes.
lines are they? They are not your lines,
That's a beautiful story. And
So
what a lovely gift to give to him. That's so cool, Agnes.
it's,
Hey, I actually got chills on that one. That was
oh,
very cool.
thank you.
Yeah.
What else is there about ageism? I know I'm calling people out more and more. You get that, um, you don't look 70. And it's
Yeah,
like, actually, this is what 70 looks like. Like
yeah,
there could be somebody over there in a wheelchair at 70. That's what 70 looks like also. A
yes,
phrase I use a lot these days is when you describe one boomer woman, you've
yeah,
described one boomer woman.
yes.
It's all over the map.
Absolutely, and especially because that demographic is such a broad age range.
Yeah.
It's a 20-year block, right?
Mhm.
A lot happens, and there's a lot of difference in 20 years. So, yeah, it is not a one size fits all kind of thing. And a lot of it depends on attitude too, right? You meet people who are 50 who are tired and old and done, and you meet people who are 90 who are vibrant and just getting going. So it's a lot about, again, who we choose to be and how we choose to look at life and at the world and at what's possible.
One more really quick story is I just last week went to a celebration of life for a woman that I've known. She's been part of my life, a joyful part of my life for 35 years. She died at age 98,
Mm.
blind as a bat, still living in her own home, still the best sense of humor of just about anybody I know. So the celebration of life was a combination of tears and laughter and everything.
Mhm.
Well, her nephew got up, approximately my age, and he said, "We always loved it when Auntie came to visit, and if she stayed over because she'd put us to bed." And he said, she would sing us a lullaby, and
Mm.
we kids loved this lullaby. And he started to sing it, and I won't do that to our audience, but I will recite the words. Blood on the saddle, blood on the ground, great gobs of blood lying all around. The cowboy is dying, the horse is already dead. And it goes on. Well, I mean, you can imagine little kids probably thought that was the best lullaby in the world. But the funniest part is the fact that when he started that song, Blood on the Saddle, by the time he said saddle, half the congregation was singing with him. So she obviously had an effect. And I mean, my goodness, what a great way to go through life and to end
Oh,
your life, you know.
exactly. Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, I want to be her when I grow up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I say that. Yeah, I've got a whole group of these women in my life, and I say that. I'm going to be
Yeah,
you. You're my role
yeah,
model this week.
exactly.
So
Well, I don't know. Did you ever see the movie Harold and Maude? It's been my
yes,
favorite movie forever and ever and ever. It's kind of an old cult classic
yeah,
about and Ruth Gordon plays a what is she 69-year old woman, and she turns 70 or something like that, or 79 she turns 80, and she has a relationship with this young kid who's 18,
yeah.
and it's about their love affair and his coming back to life and her ending hers. But she is so full of life and so creative. And yeah, ever since I watched that movie, it's like I so want to be her when I grow up. She's my hero.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we all need, that those older people that are so full of joy, and it doesn't matter what age you are, whether you're 20 or 70,
Yeah,
like having those
exactly,
women who are still that joie de vivre, it's pretty amazing.
exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
okay, tell us about Bodacity.
Well, Bodacity is the brand that I had for quite a long time before Maturepreneur, and it was this download that I got from the universe one time. It was really I was meditating, and all this thing came flooding in, and I wrote out literally 11 pages in my journal afterwards about this mindset and this community and this global movement and shifting the world from fear to love, one happy and empowered woman at a time. And I literally read the pages and I closed the book and said, "You got the wrong person, God. I don't know why you're telling me this. I'm not at all interested." And so then I spent about, I don't know, 6 years arguing with the universe. I'd get the call and I'd go, but I don't even like women. And I'd hang up. And I'd get the call and I'd be like, but oh, there's so many women's groups. Back when there was 4 and now there's 4 million, right? And I'd get the call and I'd be like, but I'm not the right leader. You should be talking to Gloria Steinem, right? And so I'd argue and argue and argue. And finally one day I very graciously surrendered and said, fine, piss off, leave me alone, I'll do it. And I stepped in, and then I understood why women, why now, and why me. And a lot of it is about, we can change society and evolve humanity through how we show up and through how we step into our power, both financially and in terms of impact, in terms of business. Especially business directs a lot of society, business and the economy. And so when women are stepping into their purpose and creating businesses and doing business and doing it differently, doing it more, collaboratively, co-creatively, etc., we shift the conversation. We shift how things are done. We shift the energetics, and we make a difference to what's happening. And I think that that's why there were so many women's, groups and so forth that grew up and grew out of all of that, is that call for women to step forward. And quite honestly, to co-shoulder the burden. Like, as much as we give men a hard time, and it's not that I don't like men, I do. That's part of why I, resisted for a while. It's like, but I like men. And the universe is like, nope, focus on women. Like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I think that men have carried quite a lot of the burden for creating things and so forth and so on. Now, it doesn't mean that they also haven't kept us down in terms of pay equity and a bunch of other issues. But part of equality also comes with stepping up and saying, okay, yes, I will also take on financial responsibility. Yes, I will also step up and be a creator of where things are going. Yes, I will also start to direct change in the world. And I think that's what a lot of that call was for. And so my banner was Bodacity, which is a real word. It's the combination of bold and audacious. And I think that's what a lot of times we need to be change makers, to be bold enough to be who we want to be in the world. And I call it being the change that only you can be. And so Bodacity is my reminder to me and to everybody else, and especially women, that we ain't got no time for our stories, our excuses, our BS, our limiting beliefs. It's time to be bold and audacious, however that looks for you, because it looks very different for an introvert than for an extrovert, for a 20-year-old than an 80-year-old, But it's time to claim your voice, claim your place, stand up, put on the big girl panties, and pitter-patter, let's go.
And I will add, there is strength in numbers.
Yes, absolutely. And community. And that's one of the reasons why, that's part of that whole reinventing society, is we tend to be more relational. And that's our strength. And we need that now more than ever. I mean, I believe that, a big part of COVID was to teach us that we are integrally connected on a global level. We cannot ignore that any longer. And so we need to have women say, can't we all get along? Especially now with all of this us versus them stuff that's going on. Women need to say, no, stop it. These people are all me and I'm them. And enough with the isms. So that's part of what my hope and desire is that women continue to move into that leadership role and say, what we're doing is not okay. How we're doing it is not okay. Here's what we want. And that is by being in community, is being in connection, and really authentically so, really caring about one another.
There we go. Boy, yeah. Okay, there's a listener out there, Jannette, who is so done with her 9 to 5. She has this idea that she thinks could really take off. What haven't I asked you that you want her to know or do or be?
Well, there are a lot of resources that are available for you if you go looking. Depending on where you are, look up small business incubators, look up grants right now. is probably the only time in history where old white men are being left out. It is in terms of grants and funding and so forth. There's a lot for women, women in tech especially, women in exporting, but women in general. Youth, LGBTQ, BIPOC, there's a lot of funding for a lot of those groups. There is opportunities for you to learn from a lot of organizations that are set up by cities, counties, states, provinces to support economic stimulation. So there's a lot of programs that will help you launch a business. What I would say, generally my advice is this. One, figure out what your why is. Okay, contact me or someone like me to help you really dial in what is my purpose, my why, so that you can use that to guide your strategy and your moving forward. Clarify your vision. What do you want your life to look like? Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? Because then you can be intentional about building that rather than reactive and just taking whatever comes along and coming out of scarcity. Then, if you are going to, then figure out what path is best for you. Not everybody's born entrepreneurial. I think everybody can be entrepreneurial almost, but that's my bias speaking. But what lights up your soul and lifts up your skirt? What makes you happy? Do you do better as an employee? Great, then let's define that. Get a career counselor. If you want to go in the direction of entrepreneurialism, you get a business coach. Don't go it alone. You will waste so much time, energy, and money on trial and error. And don't just go to the school of Google, because you'll get 27 different conflicting opinions. And half of those people don't really know what they're talking about. Like, honestly, maybe more than half. So get someone that you resonate with to help you and support you in the transition. Because like I said, it's like trying to read the label from inside the jar. You can't see what you don't know right now. So help someone, illuminate those blind spots with you so that then you can make really good decisions, move forward in whatever direction. And I would say move forward powerfully, strongly. If you need a little break, a little rest because you've, gone through the mill or something, do that. Set a deadline on it because your money's going to run out before you think it will. You got to assume if you're going to set up a business, it's going to take you a minimum of 6, and that's if you're an exception, to 12 to 18 months to get to a point where you're generating enough money to live on. People underestimate the amount of time it takes to get a business viable. And in some cases, depending on the business, 2 to 3 years. So you got to have enough money to carry you or part-time income or something. So talk with someone who's knowledgeable about those next steps so that you go in with your eyes wide open and not scared, but discerning. And I would say the most important thing is for you to know that just intuitively right now, the hit that I'm getting is whatever happened, and as hard as it was precisely because it's time for you to make a new leap. And I'm not saying that from a generic point of view, although I generally think, the universe sends us off in the direction we need to go, but specifically for you, it's time. So pitter patter, let's get at her, get help. And you have to, if you do decide to be a business person, you have to learn how to be a business person. People think if I just hang out my shingle, I'm a cabinet maker, I'll just go make cabinets and I'll be successful. No, you won't. You have to be a cabinet maker who knows how to run a business. I'm a massage therapist. People will just come if I let them know I'm here. No, they won't. You have to be a massage therapist who's really good at what you do, but who's also really good at business. So learn, take training, take courses, take programs, get a coach, read the books, do the job. You wouldn't go and hang a shingle out as a brain surgeon without going to school. Why on earth would you think you can hang out a shingle for being a business person without going to school in some format? So that's what I would say. Most people just think, oh, it's easy. I'll just be the thing I am. Be the coach, be the massage therapist, be the, whatever it is. Yeah, no.
Where do we find you on the World Wide Web?
Well, you can go to maturepreneur.world, and that's mature, and then preneur, like the other half of that word, .world. You can also find me on Facebook in my Maturepreneur World community. You're welcome to join that. I have the Maturepreneur podcast, so please do like, subscribe, follow, share, all of that.
Okay.
And I have the Maturepreneur Network YouTube channel, so you can go wherever your fancy takes you. If you like video, go to YouTube, etc. So you can find me, send out smoke signals, and if you want to get clear on what's next for you, either you're defining that next chapter or like this person on the phone and you want, or on the chat, to define, how do I get started on my business? Feel free to reach out to me. I love helping people with their firsts, with figuring out what's next and who they want to be when they grow up. I'm really good at it and I love doing it. So reach out.
Well, I'm excited now because I didn't realize you had a podcast. And I spend my evenings listening to podcasts. Okay,
Awesome.
so I'm gonna add you to my library. Okay, this is where we get up close and personal. You are, air quotes, homeless. In 4 days of us chatting today, I too will be, air quotes, homeless. What
Yeah.
does that mean in your life?
Well, I used to say homeless, and people would get really concerned, and their brows would furrow, and they'd look at me like, "Oh," and it's like, and so then I started to say, digital nomad, laptop warrior, that kind of thing, but none of that really kind of suited me. So someone gave me this word polyhomorous, and that's what I say now, and people just get kind of confused and tilt their head and think maybe I'm just kinky or something, but polyhomorous just means I live in multiple homes. And so for me, it's taken a lot of different forms. A couple of years ago, I did a lot of house and pet sitting, and my total expenses on living accommodations that year was $3,000. This year, I'm going to do something very similar. Often what I've been doing is being, snowbird and going down south for the winter for 4 or 5 months because I'm pathologically allergic to winter.
And
And
she lives in
so,
Calgary.
yeah, I know. And so, but I choose not to go to Florida. I choose not to go to the US right now for a while until they regain their sanity. And then, so I've traveled a lot through Central and South America, and Mexico. So I'll probably start just going further south now if I go away for the winter. But right now, so I was living in one home for 9 months. They decided to sell their house. So then now I'm staying with a friend for a couple months. Then I'm going to go and I'm manifesting all sorts of interesting different alternatives. My ideal scenario. So if anyone's listening and you have an RV that you're not using, my ideal scenario is give me or rent me your RV so I can go and do a speaking tour across the country about the rise of the maturepreneur and, wake people up to the possibilities and stuff so that I have a base, but I'm also mobile. That's my ideal scenario that I'm working on right now. But in the meantime, I'll probably do some house and pet sitting. So for me, mobile lifestyle means anything from living somewhere for, 9 months, 10 months, to being somewhere for 2 months and then somewhere else for 2 months, to, snowbirding. It's had a variety, to sometimes having a roommate, sometimes not, a variety of different kinds of expressions or formats. But basically 2016, almost 10 years ago, I sold my house and everything I owned, and now what I own fits in a 5x10 storage unit. I still think it's too much. I still have stuff, like I brought a bunch of stuff here and it's like, too much stuff. So I'm still culling down. I want to get to, maybe I don't know, it all fit in a small room. And even that, like most of it, I don't need. I just kind of hang on to in case I end up with an apartment somewhere or something. And it's memorabilia, but I never go look at it. So really, truly, at some point, I'll get down to 2 suitcases and that's it. maybe not. So it's not a lifestyle that's for everyone. There's definite pros and cons to it. And like I said, I'm happy to talk to you about some of the upside and downside of a mobile life. But it's actually very much more common, especially for women I call us in our middle age, but in their kind of 60s and up, because like when I've traveled through, for instance, Central and South America, almost every town and city that you go in, there's a large expat community of expats, but about 60% of them are, maybe more, depending, are women. because the women outlive the men, so there's a few single men, couples, and a large community of women living in, I lived in Boquete, Panama for 3 months, 4 months, and there was probably about 600 women over 60 that lived in that little town that were, expats from all over the place, mostly Canadians and Americans, and loving their life because they can afford to live on their pension there, right? Or whatever. So, and great, strong, bonded communities.
Those communities are, yeah, we keep on going back to community, but I don't think we've touched on it quite enough, but we're running out of time. But I will one up your homeless thing, because when I say that, I also follow up with, yeah, if you come one day and you see a car with a tarp over it, that will be me. And of course, it's just a joke, but people go, oh, what did... I tend to use, I am of no fixed address right at the moment.
Yes.
So that seems just a bit simpler. So.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, and actually, I've been at no fixed address for a long time, except my fixed address is my friend Mary's house. All my mail goes there. That is one of the challenges, is where do you get stuff? And so you need a post office box or a friend who's very stable and understanding, and you need to get all your stuff online so you don't get a lot of mail. That's one of the practicalities that you got to deal with, is how do people reach you?
Yeah, I think...
And, there's a degree of tech that you need to be able to do this easily as well. And it's just, as that part of community, being, a mobile person, however, whether you're working or not, is a growing sector of the market. Like one of the biggest growing sectors in the market of older people are mobile entrepreneurs and mobile retirees. They want more flexibility, more freedom. I gotta say, especially now in the US, the sales of RVs and stuff went way up. People want to be able to get out of Dodge if they need to. Yeah. And so there's a lot of, what do I want my life to look like now? Yeah. And we get to go, oh, well, I want to live somewhere warm 6 months of the year. Great. How do I do that? And Agnes, I talked about wanting to go to South America for the better part of 30 years. My friend Mary made me a South America birthday cake one year because I talk about it so much. And I kept don't have money, can't do it, don't have time, too busy at work, I had all of these stories and excuses. And finally, one day, even I got tired of hearing myself talk about it. And I asked myself, okay, well, if all of that wasn't true, then what? And my answer was, well, then I go on my trip. And then the next question is, great, how do I make that happen? So if you're trying to decide something, say to your excuses, what if all that wasn't true, then what? What would you do? And then how do you make it happen? That's the most resourceful question. Because then your brain gets busy working on a solution, right? And so 3 months later, I was traveling through Central and South America for 7 months on my own. And then I went to Greece and Turkey and so forth with a friend for a few weeks, and then came home. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I would never have got there if I hadn't shifted from the no to the yes. And it literally is a moment where you change that no to a yes.
I'm going to leave it right there. That's such a good way to stop or finish this up. From a no to a yes. Okay, that's great.
Absolutely.
Your website link is in the show notes. All of the links I edit. So when I go through, I'm going to make notes of everything that you've talked about today. And all those links will be on your page at our website. Listeners, there are more than a few of you who are intrigued, encouraged, motivated by Jannette's words today. Talk to us. Share your thoughts. Leave comments where you're listening, or if you're listening at Boom with a Bang, you just scroll to the bottom of the page and you talk to us there. If there was a question I didn't ask Jannette, ask it in the comments and I'll get you an answer. Share this episode. We opened with some statistics. We discussed some of the reasons a mature, air quotes, woman, yeah, we were being so mature parts of this, why a mature woman might want to start a business. And that might be a friend of yours who just hasn't been confident enough to put her ideas out there. Or maybe she and you have been throwing ideas around together. Sharing this episode might be the match that lights the fire under her or your butt. If you enjoyed this conversation, click the follow button and help us grow. I'm also registered at Substack. Following there is free, and you'll get notified every time an episode is released. Jannette Anderson, thank you for being my guest today. You are truly motivating. You are building a community similar to the one that I have dreams about. It's pretty exciting, so thank you for that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Agnes. And I've actually learned about a lot about how to do a good podcast from being on your podcast. So thank you for that. There's some things I'm going to go back and change on mine based on being here. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
I think you're a sister from another mister, because it just feels you're so good at making people just feel comfortable and invited in. So that's awesome.
Well, thank you for everything you gave us today. Have a great rest of week.